first watched Scavengers Reign 2 years ago, during the worst sickness I've ever experienced. I spent several days in the hospital, and for nearly a month I couldn't eat. I lost 34 pounds. It was one of the most physically and mentally vulnerable periods of my life. And yet, despite the association, I've only ever attached positive feelings to my first viewing of this show. If you haven't heard of Scavengers Reign, it started as an 8-minute short called Scavengers. Now it's a 13-episode adult animated series on HBO Max and Netflix. The story follows the survivors of the damaged interstellar cargo ship, the Demeter 227. After a catastrophic decision is made, the crew finds themselves stranded on Vesta, a planet that is as horrific as it is beautiful. A place that feels alive in ways we don't have language for. Much like Common Side Effects, creator Joe Bennett, this time partnered with Charles Hutner, uses the series to explore philosophy, the dual nature of connection, and what it means to survive in an environment fundamentally foreign to your nature. The show pairs its characters into emotional dyads. Ursula and Sam, Ozzy and her robotic companion Levi, and Cayman, who is unfortunately paired with a superpowered extraterrestrial panda that chooses violence every chance it gets. But we'll get to that later. Before we talk about these characters, I want to talk about my favorite character in the entire series, the world of Vesta. Part 1, Lost but Found. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. For me, Scavengers Reign might be the most beautiful show I've ever seen. Not because of the colors or the surreal organisms that roam Vesta, but because the beauty runs deeper than aesthetics. As the characters fight to survive, the world keeps asking them questions that feel impossible to answer. For Ozzy and Levi, the question becomes, what happens when a robot begins to feel? How does a human respond to a machine that yearns for experience? And how do we as humans, like Ozzy, separate spirituality from scientific discovery when everything on Vesta blurs the line between the two? When every encounter feels like a revelation, a threat, or both. That's the beauty of this world, the complexity given to the unknown. One of the most visually striking moments in the entire series happens when Ursula encounters a plant undergoing its full life cycle. In real time, we watch an organism live, transform, and die. It's tiny, insignificant by human measure, and yet for Ursula, nothing is bigger than this moment. Not even Sam, who is convinced she's in danger. Before the organism dies, it looks at her multiple times, as if acknowledging her presence. And when Ursula tries to steady her breathing, the creature and the environment around them both begin to match her breathing rhythm. I'm not here to tell you what that meant, or if it meant anything that Ursula or we could ever fully understand. The point is that she witnessed something beautiful, and more importantly, she participated in it. A moment that seems inconsequential to the plot becomes a reminder of how deeply connected we are to nature, even in an unnatural world. Just because something is unknown doesn't mean it's harmful. And in a time where social media makes beauty feel distant, this scene reminds us that beauty isn't separate from us. We're part of it, even when we don't understand it. But on Vesta, beauty is only half the truth. Because for every moment of wonder, there's an equal opposite moment of uncomfortable and intense horror. And no storyline embodies that duality more brutally than Cayman's. Part 2, Symbiosis. Cayman's story is to me the most tragic in the entire series, made even more ironic because his own ego and insecurity set this catastrophe in motion. For all his professional success and the love he had in his life, Cayman is built from layers of self-doubt. His pride keeps him from accepting the good in his life, right up until the crash of the Demeter. Vesta introduces him to one of its strangest and most fascinating organisms, the telepathic, telekinetic pandas. If you haven't seen the show, I know that sounds unhinged, but they're fascinating, and they have one of the most compelling micro-ecosystems that you see in the series. One panda in particular, nicknamed Hollow by the showrunners, stands out. It's smaller than the others, bullied, isolated, and seemingly on the bottom of its own food chain. But when it finds Cayman, it discovers something it's never had before: leverage. Hollow manipulates Cayman by distorting the memories he holds closest, letting him feed on the past while it feeds on him and other animals in the present. As Cayman sinks deeper into nostalgia and regret, Hollow grows, literally transforming from a timid creature into a hulking, hyper-evolved predator. It's easy to say Hollow chose Cayman because he was vulnerable, but I think it's deeper than that. The creature recognizes something familiar in him, a shared loneliness, a shared hunger. In Joe Bennett's words, Cayman introduced human greed and gluttony into this animal kingdom, and you can see that corruption rippled through Hollow's behavior. What begins as a parasitic relationship becomes something closer to symbiosis, a man who has given up on himself and an animal who discovers power through him. Together they become something neither could be alone. Powerful, bloodthirsty, and destructive. Their arcs mirror each other in ways that only became clear for me on a second viewing. Both are at their lowest when they meet, both enjoy the dominance they never had before, and both cling to each other because the alternative, being alone and weak, felt hollow. In the final episode, Cayman finally confronts the truth he's been avoiding. His choices caused the Demeter's crash. Inside Hollow's body, he screams to be let out, exhausted by the weight of his own avoidance. When Hollow attempts to bond telepathically with reborn Levi, it's overwhelmed not just by Levi's memories of birth, death, and rebirth, but by the memories of Levi's creator, Fiona, who was also Cayman's late wife. Before boarding the Demeter, Cayman promised Fiona that this mission would be an upgrade for his career, but also could benefit their marriage. Instead, he abandoned her on a dying ship spiraling toward Vesta. Hollow has been using those memories, distorting them to keep Cayman compliant. But linking with Levi forces Hollow to confront emotions and complexities it cannot process. The same way Cayman's darkness reshaped Hollow, Levi's purity destabilizes it. Part of why this matters is because I think Hollow is a more literal term referring to the animal's mental state and the ironic nature of its telepathic abilities, and yet it is highly influenced by the beings it links to. Levi is foreign to Vesta but finds rebirth in its natural rhythms, wanting only to give back to the planet. Hollow is native to Vesta but gains power from a foreign organism and tears its own environment apart. Taking in Levi's consciousness disrupted the connection Hollow had with Cayman's insecurities and darker thoughts. Their trajectories collide, and when Cayman and Hollow are finally separated, they share one last look. Cayman looks tired, but almost grateful for the twisted peace Hollow gave him. Hollow looks confused, as if it doesn't understand why it's alone again or what it has done. Two beings from different species, different worlds, connected by the same pain, loneliness.
Tell me again, Levi, what are we doing here?
Our goal is to create a sustainable life where we can survive and thrive until our return home.
And what's the first thing I'm gonna do when I get back?
You're gonna quit this job.
And then what?
You're gonna trade me in for a new bike.
A bike that won't bury my tools.
Part 3, Soul and Surrender. Since we've talked about the darkest and most destructive pairing in the show, it's only right to shift to the pair that grows the most together, Ozzy and Levi. At the start of their journey, Ozzy is standoffish toward both Vesta and Levi, treating the robot as a tool rather than a companion. But the planet doesn't allow distance for long. The circumstances they face force both of them to evolve, Ozzy emotionally and Levi existentially. Ozzy learns that the only way to survive Vesta is to surrender to its rhythm, to stop fighting the current and let the ecosystem guide her. Meanwhile, Levi begins to realize that they don't fully understand what they're becoming, but the vulnerability of feeling a touch or having dreams means more to them than the safety of being a tool built for human use. Their story is about connection despite the cost, and that cost is vulnerability. One of the most important moments in their arc is when Ozzy turns Levi off, nearly getting herself killed. When Levi wakes and tells her they don't like being shut down without reason, Ozzy is forced to confront the autonomy Levi is developing. Instead of dismissing it, she accepts it. That acceptance is the full sin of her surrender. Their bond is trauma-born, shaped by the dangers of Vesta. But when you look into Ozzy's past, you realize she wasn't treated all that differently from Levi on the Demeter. Not less human, but less seen. A cargo specialist expected to do her job, not to think about it. Her flashback conversation with Cayman about the ship's altered trajectory shows how little her perspective mattered. At the beginning of the story, she doesn't expect to be helped. Her only connection is back on the ship in cryosleep, so her goals are narrow, rigid, and defensive. That makes her more aggressive toward Levi as Levi begins forming their own connection with this new world, one that leads them toward enlightenment and rebirth. By the time Ozzy and Levi are separated, it feels tragic. Their bond had finally grown into a healthy friendship between two beings who are different but deeply similar, and then it's ripped away, literally. Once alone, Ozzy encounters the Scavengers, Chris, Terrence, and Barry, who are stripping the Demeter for profit. Without her experience with Levi, it's hard to imagine Ozzy allowing herself to connect with someone like Barry, the youngest character in the entire story, also dealing with finding his own autonomy. Terrence dies trying to protect Barry's innocence, and Chris wants to use that death as a warning. don't get attached to strangers, don't care, don't feel. But Ozzy sees something else. Terrence's sacrifice reminds her that connection and protection matter just as much as survival. Ozzy chooses to share her true mission with Barry, saving Mia, the woman she loves. If she had stayed guarded, she would have either left with the Scavengers or more likely been killed by Chris, but her bond with Barry makes him see her not just as useful, but as a friend protecting her, as she's unconscious from Chris's dismissive nature towards outsiders, which is obviously a defense mechanism. Everyone in Ozzy and Levi's story wrestles with the same question. How much of yourself do you give to others when everything can be taken from you in an instant? And still, the show argues that the cost might be worth it. Look at Levi, literally reborn after being destroyed by Hollow. They found not just purpose, which is usually the end point for robot stories, but peace. And yet, when Ozzy is in danger, Levi runs to her defense. They risk losing everything they gained on their journey because the chance to save a friend matters more. Ozzy and Levi surrender to connection in different ways, but both discover the same truth. Sometimes the embers from someone else's fire can spark your own. Vulnerability may feel like a cost too great, yet denying your nature only delays the inevitable. And for Levi, Vesta didn't give them a soul, it simply cleared the space for one to emerge. Part 4, Survival. When I first watched Scavengers Reign, Sam and Ursula were responsible for some of the show's biggest highlights. From Ursula witnessing the full life cycle of an alien organism, to the two of them sheltering inside an egg sac during a storm, only to be nearly devoured by a massive arachnid, to Sam being cloned by a predatory plant that is then killed by Ursula by fire. Their storyline exposes them to both the best and worst Vesta has to offer. But on the second watch, I tried not to get lost in the spectacle around them. I paid attention to their conversations, their silences, and the slow, steady bond forming between them. And now, they're my favorite pair in the story. When we meet them, Sam and Ursula are the only survivors traveling together, and the roles they held on the Demeter explain why they struggled to connect at first. Sam, the commander, carries the weight of failure and guilt for the crash, even though he knows it wasn't his fault. Ursula, a horticulture specialist, is a scientist too, but one who finds answers through nature rather than authority. Sam is pragmatic and militant, Ursula is curious and intuitive. It's no wonder Vesta pulls her in while Sam tries to push it away. Throughout their journey, they save each other again and again, surviving horrors that should have killed them. But what matters more is how they begin trusting each other with the memories they're holding on to just to stay sane. One of my favorite moments happens right after Ursula's life cycle encounter. For her, it's a transcendent experience she can barely articulate. For Sam, it's a moment of terror. He thought he was about to lose her and be left alone on a foreign, hostile planet. The beauty of the scene is that they're both right and both wrong, and they handle the disagreement like adults because Vesta doesn't give them the luxury of immaturity. Another quiet but powerful moment comes later. After Sam has already been implanted with the black seed, Ursula asks him to tell her more about his life, not out of curiosity, but to confirm he hasn't been overtaken by a parasite. He tells her about the woman he loves back on Earth, and Ursula responds, "I never expected you to be a romantic." Scavengers Reign is full of scenes that feel like they're revealing the secrets of the universe, but it's moments like this, small, human, unassuming, that make the show feel so deeply impactful. These quiet exchanges speak to a level of connection that cuts through all the surreal imagery around them. Despite the chaos, characters like Sam, Ozzy, and even Cayman yearn for simple things: love, safety, a sense of home. Sometimes the most beautiful and worthwhile moments in life feel mundane when you're living them, but in the midst of survival, those moments become the only things that matter. As Sam talks about his love and drifts into memory, I'm reminded of the ending of the original short film, Scavengers. Proto-Sam and Proto-Ursula, without a single line of dialogue, use every ounce of their ingenuity to retrieve an egg from a giant floating invisible starfish, which sounds insane, but in context seems oddly fitting. When they finally succeed, the reward isn't treasure or escape. It's a fleeting mental projection of Earth, a noisy city full of construction, bikers, and human congestion. Nothing extraordinary, nothing cinematic, just life. Sitting in my room, it's easy to take life for granted. But if every step forward requires scraping and surviving, if every breath was a negotiation with a hostile world, then even the most ordinary images, a street light, a crosswalk, a stranger on a bike, might be enough to wake me up in the morning. That's the heart of Sam and Ursula's story. Survival sharpens your sense of what truly matters, and sometimes the smallest memories are the ones that keep you alive. Sam and Ursula make their way toward the crashed Demeter. Sam saves Ursula from drowning and drags her to the shore, but the seed's influence pushes him to implant her with one of the spores he's been coughing up. He stops only when she wakes and asks what he's doing. Back in control, Sam is horrified, not just because he almost hurt her, but because he can no longer trust himself. Ursula's trust in him fractures too, and the tragedy is that the parasite is the only reason their newfound bond is in jeopardy. As they continue toward the Demeter, Sam coughs up another seed, throws it away, and as they walk, he tells Ursula to get her knife ready. She's hesitant, but reluctantly does so. It's a small moment, but it says everything. Sam is fighting the thing inside him with whatever scraps of will he has left, and Ursula is choosing to stay beside him anyway, though she is fearful. Their survival isn't just physical, it's emotional, moral, and deeply human. But also in this moment, I believe Sam is internally making a choice that on the surface is selfless, but also as an effort to preserve the connection that has been formed between him and Ursula. With the Demeter finally in sight, Sam makes the choice to end his life. Once he realizes how far the parasite has progressed, he puts everything he has left into getting Ursula back to the ship. Their journey has been terrifying and exhausting, but they accomplished their goal, and the cost, sadly, was always going to be this inevitably. I perceive Sam to have been a leader who struggles to trust others, and given the risks of his job, that makes sense. Cayman literally went behind his back and altered the ship's trajectory after being told not to, so Sam's guardedness is earned. What makes his ending so powerful is that by the time his arc closes, he does trust someone. He believes in Ursula's ability to survive this ordeal. Giving her the captain's credentials to open the cryopods isn't just a practical decision, it's symbolic. It's Sam acknowledging her strength, her judgment, and her humanity. He even admits he wishes he could have been the one to address his crew, to give himself some catharsis for the guilt he carries. But in the end, he dies on his own terms, not as a puppet of the parasite. And his final act is choosing to trust another person. It's one of the most heartbreaking moments in the story because they're so close to the ship, to safety, to a future where they both make it. But though this may be corny, the journey they shared mattered just as much as the destination. Ursula will be better for having known Sam, and Sam dies with the kind of peace he wouldn't have found alone. In his last moments, he stops fighting, embraces the nature around him, and lets himself appreciate the world he's in, dying not in fear, but in acceptance.
Any word from the crew?
No.
Damn. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's terrible. What should we do?
I'll inform the bosses, but I doubt they'll sink any resources into trying to find them.
But what if there are survivors?
Well, for their sake, let's hope there aren't any.
Part 5. Solace. I love this show, and part of that love comes from knowing how much more could have been explored after this first season. It isn't perfect in an objective sense, but for me, it's a story filled with purpose and emotional resonance. Each pairing says something different about the human experience, the cost of survival, the cost of avoidance, the cost of vulnerability. All filtered through Vesta, a world that is both beautiful and hostile, a world that brings out the truest parts of every character for better or worse. Ryan Coogler once said that the difference between film and television is that film focuses on the most important moment in a character's life, while television explores the most important journey. Scavengers' reign is absolutely a journey. And while I would have loved to see what Joe Bennett and Charles Hutner had planned for season 2, I'm not devastated by its absence. For the people who did watch this show, we received something rare, a window into 3 fictional journeys that feel emotionally charged, thematically rich, and strangely personal. As someone who loves art and loves talking about it, this season gave me something that feels important to my own path. In these video essays, I go in depth, but I never cover every single moment. I used to watch video essays without context as a kid, hearing spoilers and still wanting to experience the story myself. So, if you're like me, I highly recommend giving this show a chance. Everyone I've told to watch it has come back with a good experience, and it's the kind of story that sparks real conversation. It's one of my favorite shows of all time, one of the best seasons of television I've seen, and one of my favorite sci-fi stories ever. I can't say much more than that, but I'll leave you with this. The first time I watched the show, I was captivated by the society the Demeter crew was building by the end, and the possibilities of what came next. But on this second watch, maybe because I knew that there was no season 2 coming, the moment that struck the loudest chord with me was seeing Ursula wearing the same outfit Sam wore through the season. I don't see it as just a passing of the torch. I see it as Ursula holding on to the memory of their journey, keeping him close, finding comfort in what they shared. That choice feels more impactful to me than any world building or unanswered mystery. It's probably how I'll carry this show with me too, because beneath all the darkness, there's a beauty worth holding on to, even if nothing new ever comes from this world. Thank you for watching.